part of the goals of the country of having a Clean Water Act is to restore and maintain the waters of this nation. And one of those aspects is biological integrity. And this is from the Clean Water Act. And so biological integrity is basically what makes rivers heal or clean water. And so this definition is really you look at it, so it's the assemblage of the system. It's the whole organism itself as a river, and it has the ability to maintain this balanced and integrated adaptive assemblage of organisms. So it's having a species composition, diversity, and functional organization comparable to that of a natural habitat of the region. This is a pre-settlement type of natural functioning. And as a result of evolution, each organism is adapted to the environment conditions in its native biogeographic region. This is what we had across America. So the easiest way, the least expensive way to restore rivers for biological integrity is to re-beaver them across the United States and North America. So the hydrology of wetlands can be cleaned and is stabilized during these high flows. So here's some of the real benefits. We get water quality, we get stability, we get biodiversity, we get flood reduction, and we have climate resilience. So this is sort of, when you think of those stair steps, this is what's happening. You're holding more water in the system, but then you're also pushing it down into groundwater recharge, but you're getting upwelling and complexity. And this complexity is really what makes streams health. This recirculating through the system keeps it healthy. So this is northern Wisconsin, Pikes Creek by Bayfield. And this is another stream about 10 minutes from there, but this picture was taken about 10 minutes apart. This one has beavers in its headlands, and you can see it's running clear. And this one's all roiled up. This is during a spring runoff period, and you've got a lot more phosphorus growing in here. You have eroded banks. So the stability of the system is enhanced by having beavers on the landscape. So if you think of the fruit of a tree, like an apple tree, and upper branches or a tree, and watersheds look like trees, but they're flattened down when they're bare in winter. But you get also all the birds, the amphibians, reptiles, mammals, plant communities, insects, and all the life in mycelium that are nurtured by having these wetlands there. So each one of those becomes the fruit of that system. And with climate and biodiversity crisis, we need to rebuild the biodiversity and give ourselves climate resilience. So as you re-beaver a population, you basically restore the hydrology of the system, and you're getting the water quality benefits over time. And these also have to understand this is a dynamic process, so that there's beavers may leave an area, come back to an area, and so we have to have an adaptive system and an approach to it. The symbiotic relationship with so many creatures is significant. Voyageurs National Park, which has 31 great blue heron rookeries in it. It's about a national park, about 500 square miles in northeastern Minnesota. So within those 31 great blue herons rookeries, they're all within a beaver pond, 100% of them. Osprey nests at about 82%. So this water is life, and restoring that. In the western states like California, over 3 million acres burned, and this is extremely expensive, of course, for fighting these fires, but also it's tragic for life and limb and property. This is an example of a wetland in Idaho, which is this emerald green refuge and refugia for wildlife in a storm, in a bad fire that burned across this public lands there. So Wisconsin has a beaver management plan, which has not been followed. It's supposed to be a living document, and so there's been a failure to, in essence, follow the program and also manage for beavers in Wisconsin and consequently wildlife. Traditionally, they would take a survey here, and this goes back to 1985, and we see there were about 224,000 based on that survey. and there's been a depletion down to 54,000 in 2015 when they stopped counting them. And part of the reason is depletion is that the Department of Natural Resources believes that trout and beaver are incompatible, even though they co-evolved for the last 10,000 years. And so they have been actively spending money and removing beaver. If you see the small blue lines on this map here, on about 1,800 miles of streams with a cost of over $2 million from those streams and annual costs. So they've been blowing up beaver dams, and then they have a zero tolerance for beavers on those. They're referring to this as impacting, this wetland is impacting. But trout do very well, and all recent studies show that trout benefit from beaver activity. It changes where the trout might be, but the overall forage base is much bigger because of all the woody debris that they put in it, and also the complexity of the hydrological structure is more food producing and provides more stable systems for fish to procreate. Part of that is paid for by Wisconsin, which is paying the Department of Natural Resources, your taxpayers at work, which is called Wildlife Services. And here they're showing half a dozen beavers plus one otter. One of the unfortunate things is that over 1,000 otters have been killed by accident as type of bycatch. So these are federal lands. This is your public federal national forest, and the blue areas in there is where Wildlife Services has been removing land. This is Lake Superior for reference up there in Chequamegon Bay. So this waste is one of the things that we would like your help with stopping this and changing the policy to a more sound process of looking at using flow devices and coexistence as a model for living with beaver, but also getting all the benefit from it, and stop this waste of killing beavers as well as killing over 1,000 otters. So recognizing tribal rights, they have water quality standards that they would like to ensure for aquatic resources that are abundant and safe. And so much of this same area in northern Wisconsin is actually partly governed by the sovereignty of these tribal rights that allow them to hunt and gather across this system. But it has to be there for them to do so, or we've failed in our trustee, or the federal government has failed in its trustee relationship. So we've been petitioning the Wisconsin DNR, but we need your help to join with us. So we have some proposed steps. I always believe that you have to have a response, or you have to have solutions, not just identify problems. So one of these is a beaver management plan which would dissect the systems into subwater watershed bases for management, and each one of those is like a living cell. This is the western edge of Lake Superior. And we can see in there that this particular one right here, there's a certain amount of, in scale, and in terms of its size, it's 27,000 acres, plus we've got a percentage of wetlands in it. And from that, we can establish that the potential beaver population would be this number here, about 266. And that should be managed according to that for the hydrological health of the system, the biodiversity of the system, carbon retention, and the overall stability of the system for water quality and the goals of the Clean Water Act. If there is going to be trapping there, then trappers need to have a type of GIS system where they get a recording, so anything needs to be recorded, and have a tagging system. So there would be an automatic feed into a database to keep track of what is there. So we know the American model of game management basically says that you have to know how much you have before you can harvest from it. And so then your harvest should never exceed a surplus, or what is identified or called a surplus. So Steve Wendells, who's a colleague and a biologist up at Boucher National Park, has a great bumper sticker that says beavers are the answer, the question is irrelevant. So these dams, ponds will give us flood resiliency, and there are concerns with flooding, so you don't want unwanted flooding. There's concerns because there's this myth that beaver negatively impact trout populations, and that these structures fish are blocked by these structures. And also there's ways to protect your trees if you want to protect them from beavers. So we believe in getting a coordinated group ownership to support biodiversity for the community, public education and coexistence. Here's showing some wire cages around these trees. The Mytho project, which is in eastern Washington, has been doing this and is very successful, taking beavers and locating for people places where they're not tolerated and releasing them in safe release sites to get the benefits and reestablish this identity of coexistence on the landscape. So there's many ways to manage the Beaver Corps. The Beaver Institute is teaching people how to install these types of devices around culverts and to avoid nuisance flooding. And it's a matter of landscape plumbing, really, to manage and so you can coexist with them. Another example, this is called a beaver dam analog. It's simply looks like fence posts driven into the stream and a weaving of greenery or willow brush, and it mimics that. But beavers can also use these as sort of starters to build a dam from. This is a picture of Mike Callahan installing one of these flow devices. They have a whole instruction in getting professionals trained in the skill and the art of doing this upon the landscape. So our goals, we really want to create partnerships with those of you who are perhaps listening to create support for beaver restoration efforts and aiming positive peace and coexistence. We want a recovery zone in certain areas, especially with the Milwaukee River Watershed, which is 900 square miles, to allow this area to be restored and get the benefits of significant value of reducing peak flows. And this model could also be modeled across the whole Western Great Lakes and many of the river systems throughout the country to ensure biological integrity and to restabilize the water, especially across the Great Lakes and Lake Superior. We'd like to see the norm being getting non-lethal management adopted by counties and states, and to support the goals of the Clean Water Act to achieve this integrity and manage beaver within each subbasin and watershed to restore the nation's waters. We'd like to see an update of current science with Wildlife Services program for coexistence across the United States, especially the one here in Wisconsin. We'd also like to make the Wisconsin Beaver Management Plan a living document and get it updated using true wildlife population management that's just available using technology and record keeping and a baseline data system. So the system they're using now isn't one because they don't know what they have, where it is, or what even the results of having trapping. So the trapping currently is a 5-month season, unlimited take, anything any type of trap you want to use, and no recording of any tagging. So the Wisconsin DNR website also needs to be updated to be accurate as opposed to just negative on beavers, basically referring to them as a nuisance. We also keenly need to recognize the tribal rights across this territory and to ensure that the tribal aquatic resources are abundant and safe. Thank you. Water is fundamental life, and we're all in this together. Best wishes.